United Methodist Men, Inside Out for the Glory of God, at the 11th National Gathering of United Methodist Men, Nashville, Tennessee, Belmont University. The Effective Mentoring Workshop. Okay, today's panel, we have myself, Reginald, moderating, Larry,
Coppock,
Angela,
Williams,
Ingram,
Howard,
Cliff,
Steger.
world-class professionals that have a slew of information and knowledge. Hopefully we answer some of the following questions. What is mentoring? Why should you mentor? What are the different types of mentoring programs, and why should your church or organization start a mentoring program? So hopefully we'll touch on all of those subject matters and give you some insight on how it might be an effective way for you to reach some young people, an effective way for you to feel like you've given something back to either a child or to society or your church or whatever your personal preference is. I'm on the board for General Commission of United Methodist Men, and I'm from Los Angeles and all that kind of good stuff, and I'm just here to facilitate the process. Larry, of course, is the director of Scouting Ministries for the General Commission of United Methodist Men, United Methodist Church. And his biography goes on and on and on. He's been doing this for at least 30 years. He's been with United Methodist Men and United Methodist Church since 1997. He's head of the Scouting Ministry for the organization and the Boy Scouts of America. He's involved with them as well as Special Olympics. And he actually walks the walk. Does actually serve as a mentor for some young men. Angela has been an executive in the nonprofit sector for over 17 years. She is the African American Male Mentoring Coordinator and worked for the nation's premier organization, Big Brothers Big Sisters of America. Prior to joining them, she served as executive director for numerous nonprofits throughout the St. Louis metropolitan area. She was a PA from management from, didn't say the school.
Yeah, University of Missouri, St. Louis.
University of Missouri, St. Louis. Right. So, she's a dedicated professional life advocating for children facing adversity, and she is phenomenal and has a great deal of insight to afford us today. Ingram Howard is a retired, he's a retired banker and financial analyst. I've been talking too much today. I'm retired, right? He's past president of Tennessee Conference, United Methodist Men, chairperson nominations for the NAT and Southwestern jurisdiction, and he's a mentor. He's done it. He's walked the walk and has some wonderful experiences to share. And the last session, I think we all almost cried. He had such a touching story that just touched my heart and so many of us. Nashville District Lady Leader Cliff Steger is executive board member and past president of the Tennessee Conference. He works with Ingram, a significant amount. He's a retired colonel from the United States Air Force, state of Tennessee, and he's born in Huntsville. And what's your team again? Those Tennessee kids? The Bulls or somebody? He's been a big brother for 4 years, and now he's actually mentoring 3 kids, but not to an official program. And he looks like it. He's got the gray hair and the power to back it up. You can believe me. Okay, so it's mentoring a calling, or is it being of service? This actually was part of an article I wrote for the winter issue of the United Methodist Men magazine. It's not about you, it's about helping the young person find themselves, their passion, and their way in life. A real mentor allows the young person to grow at their own pace and direction. You're supposed to be an example someone who truly cares about others and wants the best for your mentee. You are perfect. Are you perfect? I'm not. Obviously, I've made a couple mistakes already today. So as a mentor, you are supposed to help the mentee understand that mistakes happen, life happens, we all make them. It's a matter of mitigating the mistakes, learning from them, and hopefully making mistakes that are small. We want to be a beacon of light at the end of a tunnel, I would say, so that, not everything's going to go well, just like raising your own children or being involved with other people that you work with. There are highs and lows, peaks and valleys, and you can just be that steady influence that has a positive outcome at the end of the life. Okay, Larry, stage is yours.
Cool. Well, thank you everybody for being here, this workshop and for the gathering here at Belmont University, our second time here. Fantastic university, right?
Right.
Yes, great venue.
And your presence here today, of course, indicates that when you leave this workshop, you're going to go do something, right?
Right.
And so hopefully some of the information we can impart will at least assist you in making a decision and praying about it and for God's guidance in your life, just in this area of mentoring, because it's vitally important. My experience actually goes back in terms of one-on-one mentoring with Big Brothers Big Sisters back in about 2006. Of course, our General Commission on the United Methodist Men sponsors Boy Scouts. We're the largest sponsor of Boy Scouts, the second largest sponsor of Boy Scouts in the world. We're the largest sponsor of the Girl Scouts, and then we also sponsor 4-H and Campfire USA. We added Big Brothers Big Sisters in 2006 when we found out about this a mentoring program called a MANCHI, mentoring youth whose parents, one or both, are incarcerated. The history of that goes back to E. Wilson Good, the former mayor of Philadelphia, back, 10, 12, 14 years ago, when he was visiting a prison, and he found actually 3 generations, the grandfather, father, and son, all in a prison there. And so we got to do something about this, and so he started approaching churches to recruit mentors. Cliff will talk about a little bit about that a little bit later on too, just to give you a little bit of background on that. When I found out about it, I thought it was a perfect ministry, not just a program. The youth agencies that we have, they are programs, but the church has an opportunity to turn them into ministries. And I thought it was a perfect match for the United Methodist Church through the General Commission on the United Methodist Men. Well, many of you know, just dealing with the church, whether it's a district annual conference, even a local church for that matter, how challenging it can be to be able to introduce anything new, just the process of going through committees and so forth. But anyway, it went fairly quickly as our Scouting Ministry Committee processed this and recommended it to our General Commission for the Commission to adopt. And it's actually in the Book of Discipline now. Big Brothers Big Sisters is one of those 5 youth agencies that is listed there now to promote as a ministry under the General Commission on United Methodist Men. And it actually went in 4 years ago, and it's in the new one, of course, for 2012. When I found out about it here, again, one of the things that was alarming about it to me is that when I saw some of the figures, the statistics that especially young black boys had about a 70% chance of repeating the same type of behavior that their mother and father had that put them in prison, that they would end up in prison too. And to me, that was just untenable. I thought, there's something that if we can introduce this in some way to our United Methodist churches, through the structure of jurisdictions and conferences, and getting this down to local church, where parishioners have an opportunity to participate in this, then we need to try to do that. So we set out through some human relations day grants we got from the General Board of Church and Society, small grants, basically paid for my travel to go to some annual conferences to introduce it. We introduced it into 18 annual conferences. Before we did that, I decided that I needed to be a mentor too. If we were going to promote this in the churches, just like I had experience with Boy Scouts as a professional scouter and as a volunteer, and I could talk about it from an experiential type perspective, I thought I should be doing this too with Big Brothers Big Sisters. So I went through the process of becoming a mentor. And so I started that process, going through the background checks, for youth protection. We'll talk more about that as we go through today also. One of the things that's so much different with Big Brothers Big Sisters as opposed to the other organizations, most of them are uniformed organizations in group mentoring, and this was one-on-one. So my first as I got through that, about a 3-month process of going through that, I was matched up with a 7-year-old, a Caucasian kid. And at that time, I really didn't know, they give you an opportunity to pick whether it's a 7-year-old or a teenager or so forth. I thought starting out with a young kid would be a good thing. my wife told me I probably kind of fit that match pretty good, kind of growing up with a kid, young kid like that. I was a kid at heart anyway. So anyway, Andrew was my first little brother. And so, as I mentioned in the last workshop, the first meeting we ever went to, we were going to go to the library. He loved books. And we could go to the library, he'd go in and pick his books out in about 5 minutes. Then we'd get in the car, and he'd proceed to read it to me. And but the first thing he did when he got in the car the first time is he mentioned to me, he said, my father's in prison. I mean, there's a first thing that came out of his mouth. When we just sit down in the car, he's going to go to the library, he says, my father's in prison. And I really, even though we'd been kind of briefed on this, not to be careful about how to bring these subjects up, and I didn't bring it up, he brought it up, there was an opportunity there for me, to be able to ask him a question or talk to him about it. And I asked him, what do you think about that? And he just clammed up, didn't say anything else. No, it's fine. We went on to the library, we did just what I told you, we picked out books, he was just running all over the place. And we had a very good time. We go, lots of different places, not just the library, but fishing, to movies and just various community places, like the Park of the Ninth here, just all kinds of local areas like that. Sometimes he'd come to my house too. After he'd been in the program a while, that's definitely permitted. And my wife is really kind of a co-mentor anyway. She's a pastor at the United Methodist Church, and she's never met a stranger. And he would love to come over there and have a meal and stay a little while, see our dogs, all that kind of stuff. He got lost in the foster care system. His grandmother and grandfather passed away just in a period of a few months. And so he got passed on to different relatives. So he missed to spend a couple of months. He was out of the state, never saw him again. And so I let a few months go by. I was kind of thinking, gosh, this is my first experience, and this one hadn't turned out very well. Actually, it was a good experience while it was happening, but then I didn't expect that to happen. But I shared this with you because you need to be, cognizant of things like this. When you're thinking about mentoring, not everything's going to be perfect. It's not a perfect world. And especially when dealing with youth and kids in this situation where one or both parents are incarcerated, and they had drug problems too, the neighborhoods they live in, and so forth. So the second little that I had, we call big brother, little brother, we call them bigs and littles, and so forth. Communication just didn't work out. Every time I would call his house, they wouldn't answer the phone, or if he was about 13 years old, when I would go to pick him up, he wouldn't be there. So that match ended. I hated that. But I tried. I was persistent. It was like Ingram talked about earlier in one of the earlier sessions. I mean, you make a commitment, you want to stick with it. You don't want to give up. And so we did everything we could. That didn't work out. So I did a third match. So they say the third time is the charm. So I'm hoping that's what this one is. So I've been with Calvin now about 7 years. This is a little book. Some of our activities from a few years ago, so I'll just pass that around. And so when Calvin and I started, he's an African-American kid. That's one of the things they ask you to when you're going through the match process. And to me, again, it didn't matter if it was Hispanic, white, black, it didn't make any difference to me. But I thought starting out with a younger kid would be a little bit better. Since the first experience was, I thought starting out with a younger kid, again, we could kind of, 10 years old, kind of the perfect age to me, to be able to start out with a young man like that. So we started back, so we've been together now. He's 16, he'll be 17 in October. So we've done a lot of activities together, going to various football games. We've done some bass. I love to bass fish, and although he doesn't, Ingram will tell you some fishing stories here in a few minutes. And
Mine does, whereas his doesn't.
Yeah, whereas his does. Yeah,
Swap out.
yeah. We talked about swapping it out a little bit. So, but he loves sports, and this book that I'm passing around, just to give you a personal experience here. We went. I took him to Philmont Training Center. We do a training center for scout leaders out there almost every summer. So I think this was around 2009, and so this was his first airplane trip, the first camp out. A lot of firsts, for outdoors and things like that. And it was very difficult getting him on the plane, as I was mentioning in the earlier workshop, because he was afraid the plane was going to crash or something. But as soon as he got on the plane, he was sleeping in 5 minutes. I never sleep on an airplane. And so we got there, but he got a lot. The relationships that he built with the other young, because I was in the workshop all day, so he was with kids, while this workshop was going on there. So there was a lot of firsts for him that he had never experienced at all, as both Ingram and Cliff have talked about in the earlier workshop, and as we know, a lot of the kids are involved in all the electronic equipment, whether it's phones or iPods or whatever that might be, and so it's very challenging. So when you can get them in outdoor situations like that, I think it's a real positive, and I think it was for him too. And so when we got back, one of the things, when we were coming back on the airplane, and by the way, that picture in the front is actually taken in a Southwest airplane. I asked the pilot when we landed if he would take a picture of us in that airplane. I put that on my Facebook page, and everybody thinks I'm a pilot.
You look like a pilot.
Yeah. And there I say, so anyway, but one of the key things that came up there, I think it was important to me, is he talked about going out for football, but he hadn't put any thought into it about, and no, most kids don't, about going through training and those kinds of things, about all the practices, and I played sports coming along, and so I knew, that's the first thing that hit me, is he's not going to be able to get through the practices. So I wrote out a regimen of practices for him and what to do in the next 3 weeks, which is going to be very limited, but I never followed up to see if he did it. I didn't go that far, but I said, yeah, if you do this day, da-da-da-da. And so he made it through the practices, and I tell you what, that was a blessing, because I thought, man, if you could just make it through, 95, 98 degree heat with the humidity down here, I said, man, that would be wonderful. And then the first year, he did make it through the first year. He kind of set the bench. He was kind of learning the ropes. He was really very frustrated, and so we were just trying to provide, because I'd gone through the same thing. When you're underclassmen, the older athletes are going to get priority. Unless you're just a super athlete, you're not going to beat them out. And this was the situation with him too. And so by the second year, he hung in there. And the second year, he was playing offense, offensive guard, defensive tackle, playing special teams. And I could just see ready the light come on about the third game. I mean, it was just like all of a sudden it just lit. He started sacking a quarterback. All these things. He was kind of going through the motions, and all of a sudden he was learning all this stuff. And all the training and everything just started to click. And I went to about half his games. I think we had 8 games. I went to about 4 of them. And man, it was just wonderful watching that, the camaraderie with the team members, and the coaches, and all this stuff was just coming together. And so then after that, he got into a little trouble at school. Either after that, he got another group, the peer pressure coming out of junior high school. Middle school there in Springfield, close to Nashville. He keyed one of the coach's cars, and it happened to be the football coach. Not a good thing. Not a good thing. Yeah, and so he got put on probation, and he got put in alternative school for a year, and he had to earn points to get back to school. And I was encouraging him all the way. I said, do your best, try to get back to school so you can graduate your class, as soon as possible. So he had a fine that he had to pay off and some of those kinds of stuff. Very big learning experience for him. And again, I'm telling you this too because, as a mentor, meeting with a young man like this once a week, they usually start, when I first started out, they would usually meet once a week. And you just try to work that out the best you can, especially when you're working and all that and got activities going on. But at least once every couple of weeks. It's hard to combat all the influences sometimes in the neighborhood, and the neighborhood, he lives in a very rough neighborhood. And even yourself, when you want to pick him up, you want to be cognizant of, who's your, it was really funny because after about a year when I was going to the neighborhood, and people would see me and everything, they look at me and say, oh yeah, well that's Calvin's big brother. But that wasn't the way it was at the beginning. But you got to get comfortable with that. I was actually not that, not really scared, because I used to do that with Boy Scouts, recruit kids from areas and all that. But you always got to be aware of your surroundings and all that. So, but all the folks down there, know me, now and know what I'm doing, picking them up. And but when we first started the match, also I mentioned earlier that he lives with his grandmother. His mother and father had been in and out of prison. I've met his father, a couple of times, and I wanted to stress that I'm not trying to take his father's position at all. I'm trying to be a big brother and a friend and a mentor and help him out. We do things like, I know he's had trouble in school with, if it was chemistry, I sure couldn't help him, or math, but it was something like history, anything you memorize, anything like that. I can remember us sitting down and trying to teach him how to memorize and write things down. I said, this is the way I came through. I have to write everything down if you memorize. And I said, if you can do that, then you can improve your grade and so forth. So it's a lot of those kinds of things. We went through, got him swim lessons. There's actually a lot of African American kids that don't have an opportunity, especially in these neighborhoods, to learn how to swim. So we got him swim lessons at the local YMCA, and a couple of other brothers that in those pictures that were living with him at the time that they aren't now. Because I thought it was important that he would be able to save himself, and maybe save somebody else too. And he loved it. We did that for three summers in a row. But it's been these kids have such the influences. I mean, just meeting with them once every couple of weeks or a month is very challenging. In terms of trying to offer some information that for example, right now he's 16 years old. So when he's driving, he doesn't have a car. But when he's sitting next to me, I'll give him tips on driving. You need to do this at a left-hand turn or at a light, or slow down. This is how you slow down. Or on the interstate, when you're in the left lane. Just things like that. Just hoping some of this sticks in there. But it's I tell you, I think it'd be a great opportunity for us as United Methodist Men to be able to have an impact on these kids. Angela's going to share with you kind of some of the numbers of kids that are on the waiting list all across the country. And this is a way, the United Methodist Church, we did some of this through these Human Relations Day grants and these pilots in these various cities. I can get you that list some other time. But it's important we go back and do something one-on-one. Hopefully, if it's our calling and God's calling, we need to do something here, especially as Don Davis mentioned this morning, have an impact on this generation, which we need to do. And sometimes you don't get the feedback. I know that his grandmother gives me feedback, and when I ask her if I can take him somewhere, she says he can go anywhere with you. That's what she says. And so usually, a lot of times, I'm just calling him to go. But I make sure that I meet with her about once every 3 or 4 times, and then I get information from her about things that I need to be working on with him. It's just Big Brothers Big Sisters is a great program. It's a program of Big Brothers Big Sisters of America. The national staff over there. Both Ingram and Cliff and I work in this area, so we have our match support specialist, a staff member who helps us out. There's a lot of activities they provide, and meetings where Big Brothers will be able to get together and share information. And I learn something every time. I've learned something today from everybody on this panel. And we're all in this kind of mode of wanting to pick up information and things that will make us better human beings and being able to be better mentors to the youth we're trying to minister to. The other thing I was going to mention about is proselytizing. I've had Calvin in our church. My wife's a local pastor. And so when I invite him to our church, it's usually around like some kind of social activity or like a meal, which he loves to eat. I took him to a steak and shake and got him a child's meal when he was 10 years old, and that's the last time I ever did that. This kid's got an appetite. So he doesn't eat like a child, and never has eaten like a child. That's one of our favorite places to go. But I've taken when my wife's preached or somebody else has preached too, just where he could. It's kind of done in that fashion, just like Don Davis was talking about this morning. It's kind of events and places like that. We can be around that kind of an atmosphere, but it's not forced on them or anything like that. We pray before every meal, and I ask him at every other meal. In fact, we try to decide whose turn it is. He wants me to do it, and I want him to do it. And but he knows that prayer is a part of our meal every time we go somewhere. So he's a great kid, and I would encourage you as you listen to the other stories too. Just think about and pray about this, that we get back to think about it. The age is not an issue. When I go to these meetings with other bigs, there are people. I'm encouraged to see so many young people. There's people in their 20s, 25, early 30s who we're trying to attract that are doing this. We got some of them in our churches. This would be a great ministry for them to get involved in. Plus, I've got a good friend of mine, this mentor, that's probably like 75 years old. It's been in as long as I have. And every now and then we get together and we share stories too, just like Ingram and Cliff and I do. So you've got a support system here, but it is one-on-one and it is a commitment. But all my kids are out of the house. It's like, hey, I get to do all these things. I go to movies and stuff. because my wife doesn't like doing this. So I get to do all these things, you know, that I like to do when I was 20 years old and stuff. I get to do them and all that. So I say that, but no. And the magic of that is when you're driving somewhere, and that's where you're able to get this exchange of information and communicate, and find out things. Because when you're at the movie, you're sitting there for 2 hours. So that's when, and where you're sitting at a meal, you're having a meal and able to, find out what's new in your life, what's going on, and that kind of thing. It's a wonderful program, and I'm glad that we've been doing it for 7 years. We need to grow it, and hopefully we'll hear these other stories that get you excited about doing it.
Thank you so much, Larry. Angela, the floor is yours.
Thank you, and greetings from Big Brothers Big Sisters of America. I'd like to just pay special attention and homage to my woman friend over here. How you doing? last time I was totally in, in which I was feeling pretty special. It's not often that I get to sit in a room full of men. So I want to especially thank Larry and Reginald for inviting me. And what I really want to, I have a couple of questions to ask you, and I really want to talk to you guys about what's possible when you leave here. Because my understanding was you're going to go home and do something, right? So we have a marketing campaign at Big Brothers Big Sisters called Start Something. And I always say it should be called Do Something, right? So you start a bunch of stuff that then go finish it, right? So I'm hoping that the information that I leave with you today will give you some indication of what's possible around the mentoring sector when you go back home. But first question, how many of you are already doing some type of formal or informal mentoring with Big Brothers Big Sisters or another organization? Raise your hand high. Great. So thank you for doing what you're doing. I'm assuming that you're mentoring youth. I see the other side of the mentoring spectrum, which is the number of children who are waiting for individuals like yourselves to work with them. And then how many of you are actually running or work for a mentoring organization of some sort? You run a program, you have a program at your church that you're responsible for? No? One? Okay. We only had a couple in the last session as well. And I'm mainly speaking to you guys about that particular question. What's possible when you go back home? First part that I want to talk to you about is there are mentoring programs and then there are mentoring organizations. You'll see on the screen here, several different organizations, and I could probably utter off dozens more that provide what I consider mentoring programs. That is to say, within their overall infrastructure, they have some type of either group mentoring, one-to-one mentoring. Sometimes corporations have adult mentoring programs whereby a senior staff person is coupled with a less tenured staff person to mentor them into their new professional role, right? That's all mentoring, but it is something that particular organization does. We're a little different at Big Brothers Big Sisters in that we are a mentoring organization. That's all we do, right? And we've only done that for over a century. Now, we also provide some peripheral services to what we call our littles, the children in our program, to ensure that they are thriving in that relationship with their being. But our main focus, our mission, our true north is to ensure that each child that comes within our system has a mentor, and that mentor is helping them to thrive. So we're a mentoring organization. So when you get back home, you may be considering, I want to be a mentor myself if you're not already one. Or you may be considering, I want to start a mentoring program, or I want to partner with, I want my church to partner with a mentoring organization. And there are a couple of things to consider within that. First thing I always encourage people to do when they're considering partnering with a mentoring organization, be it Big Brothers Big Sisters or some other entity, is to really get educated about the systems and the protocols and the sort of structure of that mentoring organization, right? How do they do their business, so to speak? For instance, Big Brothers Big Sisters, we have a very rigorous background process for all of our bigs. I don't care if you've been a big before. As Larry said, he's had 3 littles, and each little that he's had, we do a background check on him, same guy. Right? To ensure, because our first point of concern is the safety of our children. So we want to make sure that we're providing opportunities for adults to work with children that is in a safe environment. And this both protects the little and the big, right? So do your homework. Ensure whomever you're partnering with, they have protocols in place to protect you as an organization or as an individual. The other thing I would say is get clear about what type of children you want to serve, right? So the national level of Big Brothers Big Sisters, I have a waiting list of littles between the ages of 9 and 18 that's over 100,000. Right? Now let me get clear. That's kids who are just waiting to get screened. Right? Of the children who have already been screened and are waiting for individuals like yourselves to be matched with, I have 17,000. 9,000 of them are boys, black boys. You know how many volunteers I have waiting to be matched in the system? 200 black men waiting to be matched. 9,000 kids waiting for them. Right? So it's clear. I don't have to preach to you about the disparity between those two numbers. So it's real important on the local level for churches, for other organizations to be very understanding and clear about which demographic they want to work with, right? Because the need is so vast, it's so deep across our youth. Being clear about, I want to work with girls, I want to work with boys, I want to work with black boys, what have you, helps to hone your mentoring practices, whether you consider doing site-based, community-based, e-mentoring, what have you. We'll talk about that a little bit more in a second. You don't have to change it yet. So, point of thought when you get back home. If you want to do something, you want to start a mentoring program, you want to be a mentor, what have you. Get educated first. Secondly, who, where, what type of mentoring experience do you want to have? Boys, girls, black, white, all, people with disabilities. We have some organizations now that are focused on mentoring children who are dealing with obesity issues or mental health issues. Find out what your passion is, what's your niche, what do you already know about, and then move into that particular subset. The other thing that I'd like to tell people who are considering either getting into the mentoring sector as their own organization or just becoming a big, is that mentoring is not a free enterprise. I was naive enough to think before I came to Big Brothers Big Sisters, despite my 17 years of working in youth development, that somehow magically big people came together with little people and changed their lives, and it didn't cost anything. But the reality is, whether you're a Big Brothers Big Sisters organization or some other mentoring organization, ensuring the safety of a child, ensuring that that child has activities to engage in, be it football games, basketball games, fishing, all those things take money. And so if you're considering particularly of starting a mentoring organization on your own, the fund development piece is critical. Making sure that you have either a sponsor or your church has funds to support background checks for your bigs, or I call them bigs, background checks for your mentors, monies to support activities for the bigs and the littles, or the mentors and the mentees, excuse me. Is really important. Without that sort of consistent funneling of resources, this is when mentoring organizations are kind of like what I call drive-by mentoring. You know, they start and then they're gone. And, you know, the children that we're working with have already had enough despair in their lives. When they get that caring adult, let me tell you, when they get that one individual, when they get a Larry, when they get a Cliff, when they get an Ingram in their lives, it is like gold. And if all of a sudden it's gone because you as the organizer of that particular mentoring program didn't have the foresight to fundraise, to ensure that you had the resources to execute, that's just as devastating as a parent or a grandparent not showing up for them again. You get my point? So if you're considering it, make sure you're sure. As an individual mentor, there are also costs that sometimes you'll have to cover. You know, like I said, fishing poles are not free. Last time I checked, I don't do a whole lot of fishing. But, you know, there are things that you have to pay for. Hot dogs at the movies, you know, movie tickets, things of that nature. So if you're going to do it individually, understand that there's sometimes some cost implications involved. Now, they're minimal, and what you get in return is, you know, tenfold. So it's certainly worth the investment. So that's if you're considering being a mentor or you're considering starting your own mentoring organization. Partnership if you're considering getting to the point where you have your own mentoring program. I suggest wholeheartedly that you partner with a mentoring organization first. You get the lay of the land, understand again some of the protocols and practices within the sector. Now I'm ready for the next slide. So here's where the rubber meets the road, the types of mentoring that exist in our sector. There's sort of the two bedrock types of mentoring that we have that have been around as long as mentoring has been around, which is quite frankly older than all of us. There's community-based mentoring, whereby the mentor picks up the little, or the mentee, either at his home or kinfolk's house or what have you, and they have some type of external community experience together, movies, basketball game, what have you. And then there's site-based mentoring, whereby the mentor engages with that youth at a school, a community center, a church, what have you, that gives you that one-to-one contact, and it's typically consistent. It's usually an hour a week. You're in, you're out, and those are sort of the two bedrocks. The one that we are just starting to investigate at Big Brothers Big Sisters of America is this notion of e-mentoring, which is very exciting for us. It's very innovative. It's new. We avoided it probably longer than we should have just because of some of the safety implications that we were fearful of. But we're working with an organization, iMentor currently, has given us a different perspective on this process. So in this type of mentoring, the big engages with the little over the internet 4 times a month, and then every 6th week they have a face-to-face interaction. And I tell you, I was skeptical of this type of mentoring when I first heard about it. I thought, not with my kid or any other kid. But the data is changing my mind, and I tell you what else changed my mind. With Big Brothers Big Sisters of America, I travel about 65% of the month doing these types of events and trying to, spread the word, if you will. And I don't have time to mentor. As a matter of fact, I got turned down by the local Big Brothers Big Sisters affiliate in St. Louis because I travel too much. They said, Angela, we love you, but we really don't care that you work for the Nashville office. You work too much, and you would be more of a hindrance to this child's life. So, and I, after I cried a little bit, like, wow, that's tough to hear. Right, but in moving to Dallas, I found out about e-mentoring, or iMentor, and it works perfectly for my schedule. So now I have a little who is in Dallas. I meet with her on the internet once a week. We chat. I tell you what, she divulges far more to me over the internet than she ever would have in person. Sometimes more than I want to know. And then every 6th week we get together and we have, our outing, so to speak. But this type of mentoring, I think, it's new, it's innovative. It kind of connects to the conversation that you may have had earlier about our millennials and what they're doing. I have an 18-year-old and an 11-year-old. They are texting, watching TV, headphones on, doodling, eating, all at the same time, right? And I walk in and I say, how could you possibly be getting everything? And the only thing they don't hear is me. Right? So, but the realities are, we have to meet children where they are. I played Atari growing up. Atari is so passé now. So we have to be relevant to the times at hand, and this e-mentoring or i-mentoring process gives us that entree. Is it right for every community? Is it right for every organization? Probably not. The other thing about i-mentoring is that it happens at school. So the youth are in a controlled environment. They're usually in a computer lab with a teacher. They have a staff person who works for iMentor who's on site, observing the sort of communication between the big and the little. It's very, very safe. So I'll put that out there. So those 3 types of mentoring exist out in the sector. So when you get back home and again you're trying to think about what you're going to do, think about that in terms of how you either volunteer yourself or what type of organization you may want to start. The other thing that we say, and Cliff will talk about this as well, is that mentoring is not the only. You can support mentoring in other ways. So providing that one-to-one experience. You may not have time to volunteer. You may not be comfortable volunteering, but your financial support certainly goes a long way. It takes about $1,800 a year for us to manage the relationship between a big and a little. And that's what a paid professional staff person, ensuring that that relationship is thriving and developing over time. $1,800 a year, think about that. You know, it's very little money. In most states, it takes about $50,000 to $70,000 a year to keep a child incarcerated. Right? So when you do the math, I don't have to tell you about the numbers there. We can err on the side of prevention, which is what mentoring is. We stand a greater chance societally of dealing with a lot of the cost that we incur in trying to keep children out of trouble. So that said, I was supposed to talk about the types of mentoring. I hope I touched on some things that are relevant to you, and if you have questions, I'm more than willing to answer.
Wealth of information. Go ahead.
Do mentors ever have their children get involved with the little?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
If they want to go out together, they could.
Within our organization, we have a couple of different ways to be matched. You can be matched individually. We have what we call big couples, where we have husband and wives that will mentor a child together. You and your wife were doing something similar. I don't know if it's informally, but yeah. And then we also have big families. So in the big family structure is exactly what you just described. You have an entire family, children, parents engage with one or more children in another family.
How old is your little?
She is 13. Her name is Sonia, and she is a spitfire, just like her big sister.
Oh, okay.
Great, thank you.
Thank you so very much. Ingram, the floor is yours.
All right. Well, welcome to Nashville and this national gathering. It's great to have you here. I know you're having a great time. It's a little warm in here, so we're trying to be a little loud, maybe a little charismatic here to keep you awake. We can't control the temperature. There's just some of those things we can't do in this building.
It doesn't want to cooperate with us,
But we'll keep you energized as best we can. If you want to wave some paper or a book, go right ahead and do that.
No, you're fine.
You've heard us talk about doing something when we go back, so I'm going to approach this a little bit different than I did the first group, because it is voluntary, but Big Brothers Big Sisters, as Larry has mentioned, is the premier, without question, in terms of their accountability, their credibility, et cetera, through their background checks and all of that, which we all have to go through. You don't get a pass. You've got to be checked. Most of us do it voluntarily. We don't get a call from the office. The parent of a child calls and says, I need supervision, I need help with this child. And so as the list comes up, then you have a person that will match you. So I want to give you a couple of websites beside Big Brothers Big Sisters, or in youth villages, and there's several others out there, but some that I'm using even now after 5 years. And as I look at you, I would think most of you have children that you have raised. If you are raising, you've had children, or you've got grandchildren. And to some degree, as you interact with them, you are mentoring. You're coaching. You're loving, you're coaching, and you're modeling, which I call mentoring. So just some good tips. And I read all the time. I've been doing this for 5 years now, but I still look at different websites. I read books. I'll share one with you afterwards if you want to get this book that I'm reading now. Let me just give you 3 of them if you can write these down. If you want to, you don't have to, but a couple of these I heard actually this morning on the way in on the Bach radio, and it was talking about kids today. It's the same subject that Donnie Davis was talking about. We got to deal with this generation, the narcissism. They're into the old world. It's about what I'm doing. It's what is it? Personal, interpersonal, instead of personal anymore, I guess. But the couple of websites they mentioned was parentingtodayskids.org. I have not looked at these, so I don't know. I would assume that they're safe. It's some Bach radio, which is a Christian radio station. It's got to be good. Parentingtodayskids.org, growingleaders.com, and then fathers.com, which really will tell you about the National Center for Fathering.
The last one again.
Fathers.com, and I guess all these you're gonna do the official website, you do the www rather than maybe Google. But I just throw that out there for you to think about. And the other thing I would say is, you know, talk to, if you're thinking about this, whatever it may be, through scouting or through the organizations that we're a part of, I would encourage you to talk to people. I did that, and I'll share a little bit more, but find out about it, read about it. You know, it should be a commitment, something to take seriously. Pray about it, and that sort of comes into where I'll pick my story back up about sometime in 2007, and then on a more official basis in 2008. But when we officially partnered with Big Brothers and Big Sisters, as you may remember, I was serving as president of the Tennessee Conference of the men here, and this was a great opportunity to be an ambassador for this program. Then we had the Machi program that Cliff was involved with. I have not been involved with that one, but the point I'm trying to make, I was out here saying, you know, guys, hey, we got to do this. We got to support this. We got to get guys. It's a great opportunity for you to work in the church. I was saying we, but there was only one problem. There wasn't a we in this. I was saying you need to do this. You need to go do that. So that was a reality check, first of all. And, you know, I was kind of talking the talk, but I really wasn't walking the walk. So that was that reality check I was talking about. But I had two things that were kind of working in my favor. Number one, I knew that Larry was involved in Big Brothers Big Sisters, also Cliff. So I had the benefit of, you know, kind of bouncing that off of him, talking to him a little bit about it. And also, my sister had mentored, partnered with a young girl through youth villages in Memphis. And we had watched her work. I had watched her, and our whole family. We basically adopted this kid. Her name was Melanie. And she was around 13 or 14, and up to the time that she finally left and got married and headed out, which wasn't all great, but that's okay. We never know how the story completely ends. So we basically adopted her, made her a part of the program. And so I had that to fall back a little bit on. And so I thought about it. I said, you know, I was raised in a home, I had the benefit of a mom and a dad for 45 years, to be lost dad. My mother's still living. And I decided that I wanted to do this. I wanted to make a difference in a kid's life if I could do it. So I went through the process, got matched. And this is where the fun starts. So I'm a sports person. I grew up on a farm, but my dad was not an outdoorsman. He didn't fish. He didn't hunt. He just didn't have time for it. We had a dairy, we had a row crop, we ran a cotton gin. That keeps you pretty busy if you're farming, so obviously I didn't go that route. So by little, as I was Match's Christopher at the time, he was 8 years old. And so now the story is going to kind of evolve here. I'll bring you forward in a fast forward fashion, I guess, between the 5 years, 8, and now he's coming to 13. But Christopher's one of those kids, when we did the checklist, you know, I'm a sportsman, I said, this ought to be great. We got Titans, we got Predators, we got the Sounds baseball. Man, I love baseball, I love football. I can talk that language with them, man. So this kid said, oh, I like doing that. I said, what have I got myself into, Lord? You measure with somebody he likes nothing to do with sports. So I found out real quick that he loves fishing. That's why you keep hearing about the fishing stories. And so he's taught me to appreciate those quiet afternoons, get back on the banks, do a little bit of fishing, those type things. And I was reflecting on that, something I forgot. You know, Jesus said, I'll make you fishers of men. And that's what, you know, I keep thinking, okay, I'm going to have an impact on Christopher's life one way or the other. So he has taught me to fish, finally. You know, I kind of relented like this. I tried to bring him around, but with kids, I guess it just don't work that way. They're just not going to get involved, no matter what you do. So I stopped spending the $75 for 2 Titans tickets when he's sitting there. I want to go home. They ain't even kicked off yet. This is not going to work. This is not going to work. So we don't do that anymore. We talk about what we're going to do. It's usually a mutual decision. Sometimes he'll be real lazy. I just want to get out of the house. I don't care what we do. You know. But over a period of time, I've established, you know, accountability with him, credibility with him, and he is now 13. He is a product of a second marriage. He has 2 sisters and an older brother from an earlier marriage, which basically sort of helped him get through some of school. But they're out, they're gone, they don't really have a lot to do with him. They just basically kind of put up with him, I think, to be honest with you. The home front, in my opinion, is somewhat dysfunctional. Maybe sounds a little harsh, but that's my viewpoint. I've been working with them for 5 years. That's kind of where it's at. Unlike what Larry was talking about, the environment, where they are, I don't have that problem. You know, nice home, nice community there. They live 20 miles further away than when we first got matched. But he's raised basically by his mother and by grandmother. That's it. So he rules the roost. And it's sort of kind of all about him now as he's moving into this 13, will be 14 this fall. So is there some challenges? Yeah. You know, he tries to push the buttons as far as he can. Sometimes at school, he's made a few trips down to the principal office. But he actually tells me about that now. So, you know, we've got some open communication, and that's important. You have to communicate. You just have to pull it out of him. Sometimes he'll just clam up. It just makes me mad, you know. We've gone somewhere, we had a pretty good time. I don't know if he's mad, I don't know if he's sleepy or tired of what. So
He's
you go
13,
through all,
is
he's
what he
13.
is.
That's right. Okay, you don't want to talk, we don't want to talk. Some of the grammar rules that I've tried to use with him, which would fall into patterns and coaching and teaching, is one of the first things after a couple of times, you know, you tell me the truth and I tell you the truth. We don't lie to each other. I don't care what it is now at this point. We probably feel just a little bit on the front end. You know, we didn't want to hurt the other's feelings, but now it's straight up. You don't want to do this, we're not doing it. You know, I'm investing my time, not spending time. We're talking about investing time, maybe 3 or 4 hours. You had the questions, someone had mentioned about, you know, when you first start, you might just have a 30-minute ice cream session, and you have to work through this. It's an ongoing process. It doesn't just come about, you know, right off the front end, but you do spend a lot of time, and you're investing time, not just spending time. We call that quality time instead of quantity time, but they don't always know the difference. They don't realize that, you know, what you're doing. If you're on vacation with them, or try to get them to go to a museum or some other activity, whatever that may, especially church. I have to admit, it's one area that I have not pushed too hard, but I'm kind of getting there. That's where I want to go. That's my goal now, after working with Christopher for about 5 years. At 3 years of age, his wife went through a second divorce. And so he basically has had no involvement from his dad, no father figure in the house. His brother's already gone, although he does live in the Nashville area, but they have no interaction whatsoever. So he has no father figure in the home, no one to really call him on the carpet. And I can do that now. After 5 years, I can. I feel very comfortable doing that, and I have to be tactful about it. I'm not so sure I always do that in front of his mother, but sometimes I do. If he's disrespectful to her, I'll say, you know, you don't do that. You don't talk like that. Now that takes a period of time to get to that point, obviously, before you can do that. But I tried to find out a little bit about his dad. Still don't know much about him. He has moved away and basically has no involvement with Christopher whatsoever. And he had promised to see him a couple of times, meet with him. That just never happened, and that hurt Christopher really bad. So he was bitter about that. He's gotten sort of over that now because he doesn't expect it anymore, but he did it for a while. He still clung to that just a little bit, even though I was working with him, sort of basically filling a void there, you know, a role that he didn't have. And he was very bitter about that. So I would broach that subject along the way. And he just didn't want to talk about it, so I knew that that was a sensitive spot. You know, don't go there too often, which I didn't do. And I shared this story earlier about the challenges. You know, he fights school. He's not a school kid. He wants to fish. That's all he wants to do. He loves fishing. Take him fishing. I'll take him in the football game, but it don't work that way. And he's a good fisherman. You know, he put me down for about 2 years and kept, you know, working on me. I said, okay, Buster, I'll get there. I know you can outfish me, but I'm going to catch up with you. So I'm getting there slowly but surely. And so he's not a bad kid, but he will push you. He's a teenager, as you said there. He will push it. He'll pull, you know, cuckoo things at school, get to go to the principal's office, things like that. I won't elaborate on that, but it does happen. A dysfunctional home, not a lot of support from his mother. And so I was kind of venting about that, like I'm not making it up. I mean, I'm spending time here, but I'm not seeing the payoff. I don't see it. That's not really, you know, the way it was, but I was sick of that. So I'm venting to my wife. She says, I don't want to hear more about this, you know. You can work through this. You just got to figure out a way to do it. So the point and the story I wanted to share that I shared earlier was our match specialist who contacts the kids along the way as well as us. So I know there's an issue maybe about, you know, if you get into some type of inappropriate action like that, but that's constantly monitored all the time from the kids' viewpoint as well as from ours that we see in the home. Well, first from them with us as a mentor, as a big, and then from the other side, if we see things in the home, like a big brother that would be abusing or obtrusive and abusing there, that we would report that. So that constantly goes on as well. But it's an area you have to be careful. I am careful to do that. I don't go wherever I go, I'm usually where there are people. If we go to parks, if we go fishing, I have not had any activities that I can think of other than riding back to his home where, you know, there's nobody around. That's just kind of one of my, I guess, safety features. After 5 years, I don't worry about that too much, but I am aware of it. And some of you, I'm sure that question has popped up, you know, how do you avoid some allegation being made? So you got to be on guard for that. But with Christopher, he has never implied anything because he don't have a reason to imply anything. I'll just be upfront about that. But it does happen sometimes. But back to the story. I'm sorry I got off there a little bit, but she would ask about the dad too from time to time, and he would clam up, not say much about it. And so she asked him one day about. She brought it up again. And she said, well, Christopher, you know, she said, you heard from your dad. And his response to that was, he says, I don't need a dad anymore. I've got him. And when she shared that with me, well, that just you know, that made me realize the time that I had been spending with him was having an influence there. And it really touched me quite a bit. And I guess it solidified my commitment to follow through. I can't give up on this kid now. If I've invested this much time, plus I'm probably the only father figure he might have, maybe the only person that he trusts. We can exercise a little bit of the three things that I mentioned: is just discipline, responsibility, and integrity. You know, you look at me, tell me the truth, don't lie to me, and I do the same thing for me. If I mess up, you know, I do the same thing, let him know. So I think those things are important. So I've rambled here a little bit. And I'll wrap up by just saying that what I'm doing now, I'm doing it because I want to. Not because I have to, because it's expected. I mean, I want to do it now. And I've invested some time in this kid, but I want to see what I can do with him. And it's a challenge right now because he's moving in those teenage years. We've all had teenagers. Just pray for all of us that are matched with teenagers. I'll in turn pray for you too if you've got kids that are teenagers. So again, I hope I shared something with you that might help you, give you some ideas to think about. That's it.
Well, we're moving forward.
Do you have a question?
Questions?
Oh, okay.
No? Scratching your head and wiping the sweat off.
Wiping the sweat off.
Cliff, your stage.
Hey, let's stand up for a minute. We've been saving for about
It'll work real good.
Take your time.
get the blood flowing again. So, whenever you're ready, we'll get started. Greetings to you. And I want to talk to you about one of the programs she identified here as one of the two that sponsored by Big Brothers and Sisters. And she mentioned community-based and the site-based. Both Larry and Ingram have been involved in the community-based program where you go pick up the child at their home and you take them out and you spend quality time with them. The program that I've been involved in is called the site-based, and I would go and meet with the child at a designated location. Mine was at school. Could be a community center or some other place that you pre-identified as where you would meet the child. a couple of reasons for me selecting that. One was that my time was limited. I was, although retired twice, I had just started my own business. And so I was trying to run a business, and but I wanted to have some time to dedicate to this program. And the best way for me to do that was through the site-based program, because I was committed to 1 hour a week. We agreed on the time, and I could be there every week. Most of the time it was doing lunch, so I could get away for lunch and have lunch with the kids. We could sit and talk about things and do things together during that time frame. Let me start in the three of us have been involved in the Marching program, and it's been under the auspices of Big Brothers Big Sisters. So the question was asked earlier, if you have a program and you're thinking about starting one, important to know where your support's coming from to get everything established, have your background checks done, have some other legal protection and those kinds of things for this program, because things can happen and you need someone to oversee it and manage it. And for us, through the United Methodist Men's program, the Marching Married with Big Brothers and Sisters has been a great marriage for us and allowed us to do things without worry of concern. Once, and I was identified as one in the conference. Howard being, Ingram Howard here being my conference president, looked around and says, Cliff, I need you to help me with this Amachi program. And that meant going out to all the churches within our conference and trying to tell them about the Amachi program and get men involved, get people involved.
We hope you enjoyed the Effective Mentoring Workshop and it has been beneficial to you to help you understand why your church or organization should start a mentoring program, what different types of mentoring programs are available to you or your organization. The results of mentoring is the relationship that makes all the difference. Today's panel was world-class and professional. Thank you so much. Remember, what will you do when you have an opportunity to make a difference?